will begin momentarily. Listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, you may dial star 1 on your phone to ask a question. I would like to inform all parties that today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the conference over to Ashley Belton. Thank you. You may begin.
Hello. Thank you, operator. Thank you all for joining the 8th Evaluation Capacity Building webinar for the HRSA Pediatric Mental Health Care Access and Screening and Treatment for Maternal Depression and Related Behavioral Disorders program. This is the evaluation data collection kickoff for awardees who selected to have JBS administer the healthcare provider and practice level surveys. Today, JBS will share more information on the HRSA MCHB evaluation data collection timeline, discuss the survey administration approach, and introduce the communication strategy and awardee communication promotion plan. We look forward to sharing more about the evaluation data collection and to hear the comments in the question and answer session to follow. I will now turn over the webinar to Susan Hayashi to provide a welcome and some brief housekeeping information. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. It's a pleasure to be with everyone this afternoon. I'm Susan Hayashi from JBS, and I'm the project director for the HRSA MCHB evaluation contract. We are happy to have you join us today. Before we get started, I'm going to provide some housekeeping details regarding webinar logistics. For today's roll call, please enter your state and program name, that is PMHCA or MDRBD, into the chat box on the left side of the screen and push send. So for example, for Maryland, you can put MD dash and then the program name. Then at the end of today's presentation, we will have a question and answer session. Please hold all questions regarding the presentations until the end. When it is time for Q&A, we will give you instructions on how to ask questions. You can also type your questions in the chat box. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box for assistance. Please type your question into the chat box and push send. A JBS IT support person will support you, or we also have Amber on the line with us who can assist. Amber's our operator. So, and today's meeting will be recorded. Once the recording is available, a download link will be provided to all awardees. I'd now like to turn the presentation over to Dr. Amanda Gamerick, who is the evaluation lead for this project.
Great. Thank you, Ashley and Susan, and thanks to everyone for joining the webinar today. Like Susan said, my name is Amanda Gamerick, and I'm the evaluation lead for the HRSA MCHB evaluation project, and we're excited to talk with you today about the HRSA MCHB evaluation data collection kickoff. This data collection effort is important as these data will be helpful to HRSA in understanding program progress and informing future program and policy decisions. First, I want to start by providing a review of the data collection timeline, and then we'll provide an overview of the survey administration tasks and timelines and some additional detail around each. As a reminder, here is the timeline that we shared during the July 9th webinar with some additional survey information included. Since HRSA received OMB approval in June 2020, we're able to proceed with HRSA MCHB evaluation data collection and will begin administering the program implementation survey, healthcare provider survey, and practice level survey this summer and fall. For the program implementation survey, you should have received a notification email earlier this week that the survey will be forthcoming soon. If not, please reach out to us and let us know. This survey will have up to 30 questions, depending on survey skip patterns, and should take 20 minutes or less for you to complete. We ask that each program submit only one response to this survey, and you can choose who is the most appropriate person to submit the survey. However, please feel free to coordinate with your team members regarding your responses. For the healthcare provider survey, call in coordination with you regarding enrolled provider email addresses which we'll discuss in a bit, we plan to send a notification email to enrolled providers in late September and administer the survey starting on October 1st. This survey will have up to 26 questions, depending on survey skip patterns, and should take 10 minutes or less for providers to complete. Finally, for the practice level survey, similar to the healthcare provider survey, we plan to send a notification email to enrolled practices in late September and administer the survey starting on October 1st. This survey will have 37 questions and should take 15 minutes or less for practice managers or practice leadership to complete. So with that brief data collection timeline review, we want to turn and talk in more detail about the healthcare provider and practice level survey administration tasks and timelines for awardees who opted to have JBS administer these surveys. We discussed the details of survey administration by JBS versus by awardees during our TA calls this winter and confirmed your preferred approach by email in June. This is the current list of awardees who have opted to have JBS administer the survey. However, if you would like to change your administration approach and administer the surveys yourselves, we ask that you please let us know no later than Friday, August 14th. If that is the case, we will coordinate with you separately around the logistics of administering the surveys yourselves. So we've worked to develop a detailed timeline of important survey administration tasks to be completed, and here are the major survey administration tasks and the associated timelines. And I'll go into further detail on these tasks on the following slides. Because the surveys will be administered by JBS, a primary task for you will be coordination around providing us with email addresses for providers and practices who were enrolled by July 31st, 2020, which is the enrollment cutoff date for being included in this year's healthcare provider and practice level survey administration. We will use the email addresses you provide to send the survey notification email, survey administration email, as well as weekly reminder email. In addition, to bolster respondent engagement and response rates, we will coordinate with you to implement strategic communications activities, which Susan will discuss further shortly. So in terms of some of the details for upcoming tasks for September 2020, you will receive an awardee promotion packet with survey-related strategic communications activities from JBS on September 4th and begin to implement those activities weekly starting in mid-September. Again, Susan will touch on this in just a few moments. No later than September 10th, we will request you to provide the email addresses for all enrolled providers and practice managers or practice leadership from enrolled practices using the enrollment cutoff date of July 31st, 2020. We will provide you with a template to use in providing this information, and for healthcare providers, we'll include columns for you to indicate if their provider is part of a sole provider practice and if they are duly enrolled in the PMHCA and MDRBD programs, if that's applicable. We're requesting that you provide the primary email address that you use in communicating with the enrolled healthcare providers and practice managers or practice leadership. Using the email addresses that you provide by September 10th, we will cross-check for any potential errors like typos or missing punctuation and coordinate with you regarding any email address corrections. Then, using the finalized email addresses, JBS will send the healthcare provider survey and practice level survey notification emails to enrolled providers and practice managers or practice leadership on September 24th, letting them know that the survey is forthcoming. A week later, on October 1st, the customized healthcare provider and practice level surveys, including your program logo, program name, and state name, will be sent by JBS to enrolled providers and practice managers or practice leadership via Survey Gizmo. Following the initial administration, JBS will send weekly reminder emails via Survey Gizmo to those who have not responded to the surveys. And if you remember from one of our webinars last year, we talked about the importance of follow-up communications to help to remind and engage people to participate in the survey. So we will be sending regular reminders to those folks who haven't responded. In addition, we'll track email and promotion metrics such as email bounces, opens and click-throughs, as well as survey response rates. Following the weekly reminder emails, the survey close date is scheduled for Thursday, December 3rd. So those are the primary survey administration-related tasks over the next several months for awardees who opted to have JBS administer the surveys. And with that, I want to turn the presentation over to Susan Hayashi to provide details about the strategic communications activities related to survey administration.
Thank you, Amanda. We appreciate being able to go over these details with you. And as we had spoken about the strategic communication plans, we've talked in the past about branding the programs and being able to leverage that for engagement, enrollment, as well as for the evaluation. And now is the time when this all comes together. You know, we'll be customizing the surveys with your program names and being able to use your logos and things like that. So it's nice to be really at this point. One thing as you're listening to this part of the presentation and thinking about any of the communication strategies that you have, during the Q&A, you know, please share any survey communication related strategies that either haven't been brought up here or that we haven't used before, things that you're thinking about. We're really happy to hear some of the things that you're doing, as well as I think your fellow awardees would appreciate that as well. So without further ado, I'll jump into here with the overarching communication strategy. Really being able to have an effective really communication strategy. You know, there are two things with the implementation of these surveys. That, as many of you have shared, the response rates haven't been where you would like them on needs assessment or other surveys that you're implementing. And now this is you know, a major survey that's being implemented as part of the program. At the same time, you know, there's real value to getting this feedback from the enrolled providers and practices. And really where the benefit of that is that it allows HRSA to have data to inform future programming and resource allocation to see. So being able to communicate that in a way is really the strategy around this, and then hoping and being able to use language that those that are benefiting from these services, the providers and practices, that they'd be willing to essentially give back and take some of their precious time to respond. So in terms of the key components of the strategy, there are the multiple communication channels, and so the strategy that we'll put together allows you to leverage existing communication strategies that you're using, or even engage in others. For example, some of you are working with your local AAP or ACOG chapters, and sometimes them being able to post something or putting something on a website, that can be a real benefit. In terms of identifying champions to carry the message, some of you have shared that you've either identified, systematically identified champions, or a health professional has become a champion, and that's led to increased enrollment and engagement. And being able to use champions such as a local provider, or as I mentioned, with some of the chapter representatives, that can also be a real asset, that it's not just continuing to send reminders about complete the survey, but being able to hear that message from another source, if you will, and that's where the champions come in. And then creating shareable communication with some of the different design elements. Those are ways that also in terms of engaging with the OMB communication, it's a little more, I'll say, a little research-oriented. We tried to make it as engaging as possible, but it's also, there are limitations to what we can do because of what has to be included in that. So by being able to use the communication strategy, it's really two-pronged, is promoting awareness of the program so that there are things that you'll be able to share, and then the secondary message, if you will, of really, we really hope that you'll complete the surveys. So it's this overarching promotion of your programs combined with that survey engagement. So there are a couple things as we're working on the communication strategy where we'd like to get some feedback from you. And so we have a series of polling questions that we're going to ask at this time. And there are 3 that are going to come right now. We're going to leave those open for just a few minutes. So I'm going to go to the first question here. And you'll see in terms of being able to respond to that polling question and select the answer that you'd like. We're still getting a few responses here, you can see, as those are coming up. And this will help us in terms of how we shape the program. So I think at this point, we'll just leave it open for another moment here, and then so the most frequent communication that's being used across the programs that are here on this call now is for folks doing monthly and then bi-monthly communication. So that's, again, helpful in terms of how we do that. And so if we can finalize this, Erica, and the poll. Okay. So then moving on to the next question that we had here was, what methods do you use to communicate with providers' practices enrolled in your program? And so here we've got newsletter, email, social media, and then other. And if there's any other that you're using, if you could just type that in the chat box for us. So in the chat boxes that you can see some of the responses that using fax, using phone calls directly to the practices, in basket through the EMR, and more phone calls. Okay, and for the trainings and presentations and email, and newsletters, there's a lot of communication that you're already doing. So the idea in terms of how the communication strategy would work would be to complement that or provide you with materials to be able to use and embed in existing methods that you're using. So I think we'll end this particular poll right now. And then go to the last question for right now is how are you promoting your program, and select all that apply. And Eric, I'm just going to ask you if you can make the slide so we can see G, how many are in the in terms of the response options. There we go, and H, I think. H. So in terms of other, in the chat box, you can see that in addition to all the range of ways that the programs are being promoted, there's short 10-minute 3-slide PowerPoints on Zoom, so being able to share that and briefly explain about the program, and then working with the professional organizations in your state. So thank you for typing those in addition to everyone who's responded here, so thank you. And the top ones here, you see the emails, the newsletters, the conference and work group presentations and brochures and briefs, as well as having websites, which is the nice platform. I think for the survey engagement, one of the things that we were thinking was, you know, in terms of traffic to your website, you know, do you receive a lot of traffic, or if from the enrolled providers? And if not, that's okay. Are there other areas where to reach the providers? And that's where, you know, we'd be looking and working with you on in terms of placement for information about the program, and then a nudge for completing the survey. So I think we'll close this particular poll as well, and thank you for providing all that very rich information here. So I'll go into the next slide to talk a little bit about, you know, increasing engagement, and what JBS would be doing is providing a promotion packet, and that'll have draft promotion materials. You can customize them if needed, and then suggestions on channels and ways to promote, so things that we would recommend, and a timeline for sharing promotion materials. What we're trying to do is overlay the email reminder that JBS will be sending with communication that you would be putting out, and trying to find a nice balance of information and different platforms that they would be reached, as opposed to overwhelming folks with that. And then in terms of activities that you're being asked to do is to identify and engage with the champion. And so if, let's just say it's a health professional in your state, and you want them to maybe post something if they're active on social media, and say, hey, there's, you know, learn about this PMHCA program, but obviously using the name of your state's program, or being able to have them put a reminder, hey, we need your feedback. Those of you involved with this, please remember to complete your survey, those types of messages. And here are the kind of range of pieces of what the promotion packet will include. So some of the slides from here, the email script, social media language to use, the Canva graphics. Some of you may remember this was a Canva example that we put together that was to show how to quickly and easily be able to promote your program, and then a PowerPoint slide for any awardee presentations or webinars, so maybe where your champions might be able to say something about your program, text to include in webinars, and promotional materials for follow-up. So that's where it'll be about the program as well as about reminders for feedback. In terms of how to do it, we understand that the implementation of the communication strategies, that all the programs are unique and set up slightly differently. We provide some suggested roles here, but feel free to implement as you see fit. And the project director, the PI, our thinking was could coordinate the implementation of the plan or identify staff to do so, identify champions, and then a program manager or program coordinators would help with implementing the communication activities. So let's say there's a social media post that will go out, and maybe your program doesn't use a social media post, but one of the associations that you work with, or maybe there's a large practice that you work with, they may be the ones posting something like that. And then this individual would coordinate with us in terms of any updates and corresponding metrics. And then the champions, as we said, would be identified by the program staff and help amplify and reinforce the messages. And then lastly, the survey recipients, the MDRBD and PMHCA enrolled clinicians, practice managers, and practice leadership. So that's who's our audience within this. But again, just determine how it's going to work best within your program. Realize this is a busy slide, but it allows you to see over the next month, so from August through December, and it's hard to believe that we're already at this point, I think, in the calendar, that August is upon us. And today is the kickoff webinar, and then in the next couple weeks we'll be emailing you the strategic communication plan that includes the packet that I just told you about. And then this, as in the pre-work around the survey, as well as the and letting folks know a survey is going to be coming, and then the overlay of the reminders. These were the communication pieces that we'd be asking for each week to be done. Now, I think the balance is that we went back and forth between, do we share all of this? Are we doing all of these pieces, or is there do we make adjustments along the way? And we're going to be carefully monitoring the response rates. If they're really strong, we'll we can cut back. If we're struggling with response rates, we may tweak this or make adjustments. And it's not necessarily more, but it may be something a little different that we look at and seeing if we get a response. So, there are things that we do across a lot of different communication strategies, whether it's the type of message that will resonate, the subject line of an email, the length of the text in a subject line, they're all, or different types of posts and what resonates better. So those might be some of the adjustments that we'd make over the course of this time, but we wanted you to have an overarching view of how this would work. It may also be, let's say, in early October as the survey is getting launched, there's something that's newsworthy or there's something that's important that we communicate, that might be something that then we make a shift with the communication. So the idea is that we have a structure, but that we're also nimble and responsive in terms of the overall communication and push with the survey implementation and these corresponding communication plans. The overarching idea is that we have a win-win in terms of things to help you with your programs and then maximize the response rates that we receive. So that's the high-level pictures here. In terms of one last polling question that we have, and in response to Melissa's question, yes, we're happy to share those, the polling results with you. But here, in terms of this last question, is please read the sample messages below. And what we're looking for here is feedback of what you think will resonate with your audiences, with the providers and practice managers, to motivate the healthcare professionals and to help them complete the surveys that we'll be administering. And so if you can, I just want to make sure everyone can see those response rates, the response options as you read them. What do you think is going to make the most sense, or make them go, yeah, I want to help, or I want to know that funding's available, or what will motivate them to respond? And and the caveat here is that we will tailor the message here so that it, where we say PMHCA, MDRBD, we realize they may not necessarily, they're not going to know necessarily what that is, but how we can tailor it to your programs. So as you can see here, the two most, the types of messaging that resonated most here was, as a provider, your participation in the survey serves as an opportunity for you to share experiences that may inform how PMHCA and MDRBD programs can be improved moving forward. And then the last one, in terms of your feedback will help secure funding for ongoing and then the program. So we will close this here, but then also know that we will share these results so you can see what folks are doing. And then I do see a question here. I'm going to move to the Q&A session, and I'll start, Alexis, with your question. Have you all decided how you will handle providers who are enrolled in both programs? Will they get one survey or two surveys? And at this point, we have not decided. What we made the decision to do was, once we get the email list and be able to look across that, then we will, and our understanding at this point, based on the feedback that you all have provided, is that the problem isn't going to be too extensive. So we want to really look at what, how large an impact that is, and then coordinate with HRSA and you in terms of a decision on how best to handle that. So we will be in coordination with that, in coordination with you on that. I see another question here, and I do want to give the operator a chance to give instructions to call in with a question. So let me just take a moment here to ask Amber to do that, and then Melissa, I will answer your question as well.
Great, thank you, Susan. This will begin the question and answer session for the phone. If you have a question, please dial star 1, unmute your phone, and record your name clearly, as it is required to introduce you. If you'd like to withdraw your question, you can dial star 2. Again, to ask a question, dial star 1, and I'll take a few moments to collect the names, and I'll turn it back to you, Susan.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, then in terms of, for Melissa, are you considering providing incentives for survey participation and completion? As much as we would like to be able to do that, there aren't the resources in the budget to be able to do that. So unfortunately, it's really being able to, I'll say, play on the goodwill of the providers who are enrolled to complete the surveys, but we realize that that would be ideal in terms of being able to do that. The other thing, just as a side note, is that with health professionals, given what private industry pays for survey completions, like pharmaceutical companies, it gets very expensive in terms of very quickly. So usually the going rate is around $200 for a single survey completion. That would get you a pretty much kind of almost they'll open the email and should respond to that. So that gets very expensive very quickly when looking at thousands of response rates in terms of that. So any other questions that the attendees here may have today? Then if not, the thing that I wanted to ask was going back to the question, I'm wondering if you could, we've gone over some of the communication strategies that we'll be looking at incorporating, in some of the presentations awardees, that if maybe you would share either on the phone or in the chat box any other survey and program communication strategies that have not been brought up, if you don't mind sharing those. In the meantime, I will answer, Melissa, your question. Do you have a target response rate? Yes, we do, as a matter of fact. For the OMB requirement is that it's an 80% response rate. So as you can imagine, that is a heavy lift, and that's also part of the reason around this kind of communication engagement strategy, rather than getting, let's say, 2 weeks into the survey administration and saying, oh, our response rates aren't where we are. We want to start out at the front end to have it be that we're engaging the target audience, and is that a way that it can help the programs thrive even more than they are, and then be able to also kind of help with the goodwill and say, yes, I want to contribute to this because these programs are great. It's helping me a lot. So that's where we thought the overlaying the communication strategy during the survey administration could be a win-win for everybody. So I'll just ask the operator, any questions at this point that have come in over the phone?
We show no questions at this time.
No, okay, great, thank you. Yep. Then in terms of other questions that we had was, do you have a current communication strategy in place? And if you want to share a little bit with us, it can be a yes, no, that you could put your state and program and say, yes or no, and we know from the order what this is referring to. That will also help us know if where we're complementing what you're doing and not doing. So if I could ask you to respond to that in the chat box, that would be great. Thank you, Joe, for responding to that. Can I put you on the spot, Joe? Folks who are saying yes, anything to share that you're doing that you found particularly helpful or useful? Or messages that resonated that was, thank you, Rachel. So using regular email and fax communication. It's good to know that the fax is still effective here. A number of folks writing in the chat box right now. Give everyone a moment to be able to do that. I will answer Alexis's question. If I could elaborate what the message is when communicating via email, is this patient-specific or more general information about the program? Given that the target audience for the surveys is the practices and the health professionals, it will be targeted to them to be aware of your programs, as well as that look for an opportunity to provide feedback on those. Does that answer your question, Alexis? Or I'll ask a follow-up if you have another question. And then Laura is doing the email and phone again. And then at other times, yes, many of you it's all virtual now, and maybe some starting to go back online. Okay. And Joe, so the online training materials, that's where it's a nice opportunity to be able, if we provide a slide or something, or a thumbnail to be able to put into that to remind folks that they will be being asked to provide feedback. And the same with the newsletters, being able to say, hey, it's that time for your feedback, and looking for those. Appreciate what everyone's sharing in the chat box here, and we'll keep track of those pieces that you're sharing as we look at this. I know we're just about out of time here, and so what I'll say is that you can keep typing it as I'm talking here. If you have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your project officer, and and then I just want to say there may be some individuals who are coming to the 2:45 session. If you just wait a moment, we'll be transitioning to your presentation shortly. We divided up the programs for when JBS is administering, or the programs are administering themselves, and so that's how we broke up the presentation, so it was targeted to the different survey administration methods. So like I said, if there's anything that you have some follow-up questions, please reach out to your PO or to us with a CC to the PO, and we're happy to get back to you. So we are excited to be at this point and appreciate everyone's participation. I'll just ask Ashley or anyone from HRSA, any comments at this point?
Hi, no, thank you, Susan, for that overview, and just want to thank everyone for participating on today's webinar.
Okay, thank you so much. So we're going to wrap up the first session now, and that is, and So for the participants who are who JBS is administering the survey, you can leave the webinar now, and then for those that are going to self-administer, we'll be starting your presentation in just a couple minutes. I'm going to turn it back to the operator.
Thank you. That concludes the first presentation. The participants from that group may disconnect at this time. Speakers, please stand by for the post-conference there. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ashley Belton. I'm the project officer for the Screening and Treatment for Maternal Depression and Related Behavioral Disorders program. I want to thank everyone for joining the 8th Evaluation Capacity Building webinar for the HRSA Pediatric Mental Health Care Access and Screening and Treatment for Maternal Depression and Related Behavioral Disorders programs. This is the evaluation data collection kickoff for awardees who selected to administer the healthcare provider and practice level surveys. Today, JBS will share more information on the HRSA MCHB evaluation data collection timeline, discuss the survey administration approach, and introduce the communication strategy and awardee communication promotion plan. We look forward to sharing more about the evaluation data collection and hearing the comments in the Q&A session to follow. I will turn over the webinar to Susan Hachi to provide a welcome and brief housekeeping information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. And I'm Susan Hayashi from JBS, and I'm the project director for the HRSA MCHB evaluation contract. Before I get started, I wanted to provide some housekeeping details regarding webinar logistics. So for today's roll call, please enter your state followed by your program name. That is PMHCA or MDRBD. So, for example, I see Alex already entered for Colorado and PMHCA. So that's, if everyone could do that, then we can take attendance. And thank you, Cynthia, for responding to the chat. We appreciate that, and we'll get that, get you all the information that you need on top of what's presented here. So at the end of today's presentation, we will have a question and answer session. Please hold all questions regarding the presentation until the end. When it is time for the Q&A, we'll give you instructions on how to ask questions. You can also type your questions in the chat box. If you're having any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box for assistance. Please type your question into the chat box and push send, and either Amber or JBS IT person, Amber's our operator for today, or the JBS IT person will assist you as soon as possible. Today's meeting will be recorded. Once the recording is available, a download link will be provided for all awardees. So I will turn it over to Amanda Gamerick. Dr. Amanda Gamerick is our evaluation lead for this project.
Great,
Amanda.
thank you. Oh, sorry about that. Thank you so much, Ashley and Susan, and thanks everyone for joining the webinar. My name is Amanda Gamerick, like Susan said, and I'm the evaluation lead for the HRSA MCHB evaluation project. And we're excited to talk with you today about the HRSA MCHB evaluation data collection kickoff. So this data collection effort is important as these data will be helpful to HRSA in understanding program progress and informing future program and policy decisions. We want to start by providing a review of the data collection timeline and then talk a bit about the survey administration tasks and timelines with some additional detail around each of those. So here is the timeline that we shared during the July 9th webinar with some additional survey information included here. So since HRSA received OMB approval in June 2020, we are able to proceed with HRSA MCHP evaluation data collection, and we'll begin administering the program implementation survey, healthcare provider survey, and practice level survey this summer and fall. For the program implementation survey, you should have received a notification email earlier this week that the survey will be forthcoming soon. If you didn't receive that email, please reach out to us and let us know. This survey will have up to 30 questions and should take 20 minutes or less for you to complete. We are asking that each program submit only one response to the survey, and you can choose who is the most appropriate person to submit the survey. However, we encourage you to feel free to coordinate with your team members regarding your responses to the program implementation survey. For the healthcare provider survey, since you will be administering those surveys, you'll be sending a notification email to enrolled providers in late September, and we'll administer the survey starting on October 1st. And you'll do both of those using OMB-approved email templates that we will be providing to you. This survey will have up to 26 questions and should take 10 minutes or less for the providers to complete. And then finally, for the practice level survey, similar to the healthcare provider survey, using the email templates that we provide to you, you'll send the notification email to enrolled practices in late September, and again, administer the survey starting on October 1st. This survey will have up to 37 questions and should take 15 minutes or less for practice managers or practice leadership to complete. So with that brief data collection timeline review, we want to turn to talk in more detail about the healthcare provider and practice level survey administration tasks and timelines for awardees who opted to administer these surveys. So we discussed the details of survey administration by JBS versus by awardees during our TA calls this winter, and also confirmed your preferred approach by email in June. And this is the current list of awardees that we have who have opted to administer the surveys. However, if you would like to change your administration approach and have JBS administer the surveys, we ask that you please let us know no later than Friday, August 14th. And if that's the case, we would coordinate with you separately around the logistics of JBS administering these surveys. Alternately, if we have you listed incorrectly, we'll also coordinate with you to make sure that we have you classified in the correct approach. And New Jersey, I saw that, and we apologize for that error. So in terms of some of the important dates around the HRSA and CHP evaluation survey administration, we've worked to develop a detailed timeline of some of the important tasks around survey administration that need to be completed. And so this slide includes some of the major survey administration tasks and the associated timelines, and I'll talk a little bit more about each of these on the following slides, as will Susan. For this group, since you'll be administering the surveys, an initial primary task for you prior to administering the surveys will be internal coordination around compiling email addresses for providers and practices who enrolled by July 31st, 2020. We're using July 31st as the enrollment cutoff date for being included in this year's healthcare provider and practice level survey administration. So you would use those email addresses for the enrolled providers and practices to send the survey notification email, the survey administration email, as well as any weekly reminder emails using the OMB approved templates that we will provide to you. In addition, in order to bolster respondent engagement and response rates, we will coordinate with you to implement strategic communications activities. Susan will discuss further shortly, but the thought behind this is that we're somewhat constrained in our survey communications as we have to use the OMB approved text. But the strategic communications activities will build an opportunity to communicate with providers and practices around your programs and the survey administration to encourage participation and completion. So in terms of some of the details for upcoming tasks for September, you will receive an awardee promotion packet with survey-related strategic communications activities from JBS on September 4th. and begin to implement those activities weekly starting in mid-September. Again, Susan will touch on that in just a few minutes. And then beginning in early September, you should begin compiling the email addresses for all providers and practice managers or practice leadership from enrolled practices using the enrollment cutoff date of July 31st. So we will provide you with a template that you can use in compiling this information. And for healthcare providers, we'll include columns for you to indicate if their provider is part of a sole provider practice and if they're duly enrolled in the PMHCA and MDRBD programs as applicable. In either of these cases, we request that you coordinate with us regarding survey administration approach for these individuals as we finalize the approach with HRSA. We recommend that you be sure to compile the primary email addresses that you've been using in communicating with the healthcare providers and practice managers or practice leadership to ensure that the survey reaches them. And using the compiled email addresses and the email templates provided by JBS, as awardees who are administering the survey, you will send the healthcare provider survey and practice level survey notification emails on September 24th. This will let them know that the survey is coming soon. A week later, on October 1st, you'll send the healthcare provider and practice level surveys to enrolled providers and practices, again using the email templates that we provide to you. And these templates will be customized to include your program name and state name, and will include a survey Gizmo web link that healthcare providers and practice managers or practice leadership will use to access the survey. And like we've discussed before, we will be using your program branding and logos to customize the surveys. So the survey will have not only your program name and state name, but also your logo to hopefully help increase respondents' awareness that they're responding to a survey about your program. Following the initial survey administration, we'll ask that you send weekly reminder emails, again using the templates provided by GBS, and track email and promotion metrics such as email bounces, opens, and click-throughs if possible, depending on how the surveys are being administered, as well as survey response rates. So for all of the email communication templates and tracking templates that I've discussed here, we'll be providing those to you, including written guidance for how to use those in late August to early September. And then following those weekly reminder emails, the survey close date is scheduled for Thursday, December 3rd for both the healthcare provider and practice level surveys. So those are the primary survey administration related tasks for over the next several months for awardees who have opted to administer the surveys. And with that, I want to turn the presentation over to Susan Hayashi, who will provide some details about the strategic communications activities related to survey administration.
Thank you very much, Amanda. And as Amanda said, that being able to overlay a strategic communication plan with the survey administration, the overall approach is to allow a platform and support your promotion of your program, as well as an awareness of the importance of providing feedback about their experiences with the program. And being able to have those providers and practices respond obviously is critical. And as a way of doing that, we thought this overlay could be a nice way to do that. And one other piece, at the end of the question and answer, we'll leave some time for questions that you may have. And at that point, if you wanted to share some communication-related strategies that you have been using, whether it's for surveys or otherwise, about your program, that would be helpful as well. So you can keep that in mind as I'm talking here. But in terms of, oops, jumped ahead on me here. The overall way of being able to promote the programs and increase respondent engagement with the surveys, there are three major components to it. One is using multiple communication strategies, so sharing the survey information about the awardee communication. So thinking of it as a bit of a layering approach where there's a way to increase awareness about the program, as I was saying, and then saying we want your feedback, or remember it's time to give your feedback. And then also identifying champions to help carry that message. And some of you have shared that either strategically engaged with a champion, or you a champion emerged and was promoting your program, and that resulted in increased enrollment with health professionals and practices for your programs. But being able to really now systematically identify someone and have them share messages about, are you aware this program, this is a great program, and then being able to also have them provide, I'll say, nudges or reminders around completing the surveys and providing their feedback. The other piece is some of you are actively engaged with your local chapters for the American Academy of Pediatrics or ACOG, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. And so that is, again, a way where, depending on the strategies used for communication, if there's a website, if maybe your program has a website, but then the traffic may not be that busy, but if you can get a post in a chapter newsletter for AAP or something like that, there are different ways that can be used to create the excitement and about both the programs and then the surveys as well. And then what we'll be doing is creating the shareable communication, where it's developing design elements using Canva graphics, or allowing you to adapt something to your colleague text that awardees can use to easily share through communication channels. And we'll talk about more of that in terms of the promotion packet that we'll be preparing. But as we're working on that promotion packet, we have 3 polling questions here that we wanted to ask you, and we will share that information afterwards as well. But if you could take a moment and respond to this, of how frequently do you communicate with your providers and practices enrolled in your program? And if you could respond to that question. And part of being able to look at this, we're trying to get a sense of how frequent is the communication now, and then if we're engaging in different communication activities, we want to really kind of work to align things with that. So 50% are reporting monthly communication, and then followed by bi-monthly. And that was consistent with the other webinar as well, that these were the 2 most popular responses in terms of the overall number of how frequently the communication is. So we've got that finished up here, and I'll move on to the next polling question. So thank you for responding to that. So our next question is, what methods do you use to communicate with your providers and practice managers enrolled in your program? And you can select all that apply here. So the response options are the newsletter listserv, the email, social media, trainings, presentations, and for any other if you select E, if you could type what that is in the response box, that would be great. We've got several folks writing in the chat box, so we'll give everyone a little time for that. So a couple programs are doing the phone calls, coaching calls, outreach calls, as well as having using the website, and being able to understand those elements along with these other pieces, that will allow us to help build out the promotion packet even more. Joseph, I see that you put in there promotional items. Would you mind typing in a little more detail about maybe what that entails, so that is it kind of ads maybe that you're putting, or a particular type of placement, or how you're doing that? In terms of other responses, the email, the newsletters, everyone's doing the trainings and presentations. Obviously a very active group here in terms of the efforts that you're undertaking to promote the program. And so our hope is that what is being developed here will complement those things that you're already doing. And okay, so and then thank you, Joe. The direct mail and personal meetings, that's very helpful to hear and see. So I will close this poll for right now, and then I'll move on to a final polling question. For right now, we do have one more at the end that we'll ask. So this next one, how are you promoting your PMHCA and MDRBD program? So, and as I think Joseph gets at some of the things that you're doing. Some of you already shared about the website. So, and again, if you select H, if there's something other, if you could type that in the chat box, that would be great. So in terms of some of the most popular pieces, the brochures, the conferences, e-blasts, and the websites, as well as newsletters. So a lot of activities going on. Kim, you shared about doing virtual site visits and a cross-system advisory committee. So Kathy, I'm going to piggyback on that just to say that may be really a set of champions that you have right there. So if anyone has some sort of advisory committee, it doesn't just need to be one, but a group of folks asking to talk to their colleagues, get the message out about the programs, as well as providing the feedback for the surveys. And creating a Meet the Provider video and the virtual site visits. So so there may be, if you have a leave behind and there's something to add to that, or some language that's used, there may be a script that is included in the promotion packet, whether for a phone call or these virtual site visits, if you're using slides or using slides to go over that. So that's the overall strategy in terms of how we would use that. At this point, we'll close this particular poll, and just thank you for all the insights that you've provided, both responding to the survey and the chat box. I've mentioned, just to go over what JBS will be providing, and that's that promotion packet with the promotion materials, suggestions for channels, which is where to share the promotion materials, and a timeline for the promotion activities. And then we'll follow up with you on the progress on the communication activities. And then here, in terms of what we'll be asking you to do, is identify and engage with champions to reinforce and amplify the awardee promotion messages, and then send and post weekly communications to reach the survey recipients. And these are things that we know as of now would be in the promotion packet. So the slides from today, email scripts, social media language, Canva graphics that you can use or adapt for your program, a PowerPoint slide that can be incorporated into awardee presentations, or you're doing a virtual site visit and you have slides, a leave behind for a site visit, text to include in webinars, and other promotional materials for follow-up. So the overarching idea is that there's a set of resources that can be used and adapted for your programs. We recognize that all your programs are structured differently, to meet your needs and how best works for your program. In terms of roles, we took a path here at trying to allow you to see what might be helpful roles as part of implementing the communication strategies. So the project director or PI, depending on what your program has or both, is coordinating to implement the communications plan or identifying staff to do so, and identifying champions. And then a program manager or program coordinators to help with implementing the communications activities specified in the promotions packet, and provide updates on promotion activities and corresponding metrics that would be coordinating with us. And then having champions help amplify and reinforce the messages. And then our target audiences are the survey recipients, which are the enrolled clinicians and practice managers and practice leadership. So that may be a way to approach and think about the activities. In terms of an overall timeline here, wanted to share the, we know from the presentations and things that you have shared that hitting response rates that you like for your survey administration, there have been challenges. And with this particular promotion and communication set of activities, what we didn't want to have happen is get halfway through, or the survey administration, so in early October, or sorry, earlier in November, and realize we're not hitting our response rates. Let's do something and try to rally to get completion rates. And we thought that by being proactive here and really looking at an overarching communication strategy that could help support your programs, as well as getting the feedback that we want from the surveys, this would be a proactive way to do that. What we will be doing is looking at this in a way that we're going to be monitoring. So we thought, rather than trying to come back to you to say, oh, we need you to add this, we need you to add this, we want to show you kind of what would be an overarching plan, what would that look like? And that's so this overlay of you're sending reminder emails for the survey, but then through other channels and other ways to reach that audience, say, hey, remember, you got to give your feedback. We wanted to overlay that here. And that's the approach as we're taking that, and then being able to work with you. So we'll be carefully monitoring the response rates for the surveys. And we had a question in the last session, what's your response rates that you're looking for, and are there resources to pay for incentives, completion incentives? So unfortunately, there aren't resources in our contract to be able to pay for incentives for completion. And we have a high target response rate of 80%. So, and that's required by OMB. So that is a heavy lift on that end, but we are putting all the mechanisms in place to maximize that. And that's really where the communication strategy. We also have heard you where sometimes from you that some of the enrollment may not be quite where you'd like it to be. So we thought this could be a win-win for you to receive some promotional materials as well as reinforce that need for feedback. So I do have one more polling question for you, and this polling question allows us to get some feedback from you, what you think will resonate with what kinds of messages will resonate with the healthcare professionals and practice managers that would be responding. So if you read each one of these messages, we'll get the poll going, and which do you think will resonate the most for providers and practice managers as motivation to complete the survey? So why should they do this? So if you could let us know what you think. We will customize that. That little asterisk is referring to that we would say that they're not going to know what the PMHCA or MDRBD program is, so we have to customize that messaging, but wanted to see what might make the most sense to use. Give folks just a minute yet because we realize it takes time to read them and think about that. Okay. Well, I'll say overwhelmingly the first message that you think will resonate most with the providers and practice managers. So as a provider, your participation in the survey serves as an opportunity for you to share experiences that may inform how the program can be improved moving forward. So thank you so much for that, that feedback. We'll stop that here and now want to see, go to the time for some question and answers that you may have. And if you recall early on when I started presenting, I said at the end wanted to have a little time for you to share any communication-related strategies, whether for surveys or for your program as a whole that you'd like to share. Please put that in the chat box. We've got, and then also, operator, would you like to be able to explain if people want to call in with a question?
Sure. Thank you, Susan. So if you would like to ask a question, you can dial *1, unmute your phone, and record your name clearly. Your name is required to introduce you. If you'd like to withdraw the question, you can dial *2. Again, to ask a question, dial *1, and it will just take a few moments for me to collect names. I'll turn it back over to you, Susan.
Okay, no problem. In terms of the, I see some questions coming in. I'm going to respond to Susan's here. Will there be a single set of survey questions for clinicians, managers, and leadership? There are two different surveys. The one is for clinicians, for the healthcare professionals. That's the HCP survey. And the other is for the leadership, so for the practice managers and leadership. So I'm going to just hop back real quick to slide 4 that Amanda presented on, and then just to show that for everybody. Okay, oops, that went all the way back. So these slides will be available, but you can see here, Susan, in answer to your question, some of the details. And Kathy also, if you have further questions on that, yeah, don't hesitate to ask. Any other questions, operator? Any questions on the phone line?
We show no questions at this time, but as a reminder, you can dial *1 if you'd like to ask a question over the phone. Thank you.
Okay. And then do have a question is, in terms of, do you have a current communication plan strategy? And if so, can you share a bit about it? So kind of like how we do roll call, if you can put your name in and then say yes or no. And if yes, if you can share a couple details about it, that would be great. The other piece that I'll put out there with the survey administration that you'll be doing, if you have any questions about that, please don't hesitate to type them in the chat box or call in with those, and we're happy to answer those as well. Okay. It doesn't look like we have any further questions at this point. Ashley, is there anything else that you would like to add or cover yet before we leave on HRSA's behalf?
I would just like to thank JVS International for putting together this great presentation and getting all of the awardees ready for those surveys to go out this fall. And I would also like to thank all of the MDRBD and PCMH awardees for their participation on this webinar. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. And then for New Jersey, we will follow up with you as well. So just wanted to tell everyone we appreciate your time and we look forward to working with you. It's nice to be at this point in terms of the evaluation, and we know your programs are as busy as ever and really making an impact. So it's just a pleasure to work with you, and thank you again for your time.
Okay, that concludes today's that concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time. Speakers, please stand by for your post-conference.
Thank you.